This lesson deals with the concept of vertical exaggeration. The map that will be used is 3420 CA Bredarsdorp topographical map. So what exactly is vertical exaggeration, and when do we apply the concept of vertical exaggeration? Vertical exaggeration tells us how many times the vertical scale is bigger than the horizontal scale. So vertical exaggeration is a comparison between the vertical scale and the horizontal scale of a cross-section, and it tells us how many times the vertical scale has been exaggerated over and above the horizontal scale of a particular map. Hence, in the final answer to a vertical exaggeration calculation, the word times has to be used. Vertical exaggeration is applied in the context of a cross-section or a cross profile. Vertical exaggeration compares the vertical scale of a cross-section with the horizontal scale. The vertical scale is exaggerated to give a better view or a better idea of what the landscape looks like. The extract from the topographical map shows the land between spot height 77 and spot height 27. The cross section needs to be drawn between the spot heights, indicating what the land in actual fact looks like if viewed from the side. Two cross sections have been drawn on screen. These two cross sections represent the exact same landscape between spot height 77 and spot height 27 from the topographical map. However, they differ with regards to the vertical scale that was used to draw the cross section. In the first instance, we used a vertical scale of 1 centimeter equals 20 meters, and the second cross section shows a diagram or shows a cross section where the vertical scale used was 1 centimeter equals 10 meter. There are a number of things to just be familiar with. Your horizontal scale is always marked with the scale of the map. For example, because this cross section used the topographical map to draw the landscape from, we use a 1:50,000 scale. If the cross section needs to be drawn using the orthophoto map, then the horizontal scale will be marked with 1:10,000. So please do remember that the horizontal scale of your cross section corresponds with the scale of the map that is being utilized. In the first instance, again, a vertical scale of 1 centimeter equals 20 meters was used, and in the second cross section, a vertical scale of 1 centimeter equals 10 meters was used. If you have a look at the scales, you would see that the shape and the outline look similar. However, in the first cross section, the slopes appear to be much gentler and the landscape tends to be much flatter than in the instance of the second cross section. So what the cross sections have done, the cross sections have exaggerated the vertical scale over and above the horizontal scale, which is the scale of the map. And the same concept applies here, that this vertical scale of 1 centimeter equals 10 meters has been exaggerated over and above the map scale of 1:50,000. So in calculating the vertical exaggeration, we are interested in how many times this scale is larger than 1:50,000, but we are also interested in how many times a scale of 1 centimeter equals 10 meters is larger than a 1:50,000 scale. The formula for vertical exaggeration is given as vertical scale divided by the horizontal scale, remembering that vertical exaggeration is interested in the relationship between the vertical scale and the horizontal scale, bearing in mind that when we change and adapt the vertical scale, we actually exaggerate what the landscape looks like. So for vertical exaggeration, you are interested in how many times the vertical scale has been exaggerated over and above the horizontal scale or the actual scale of the map. An important thing to remember is that you need to be familiar with converting centimeters to meters by multiplying by 100. And this is important because in the cross section, the vertical scale is often given as 1 centimeter equals a certain number of meters. Let's calculate the vertical exaggeration using a vertical scale of 1 centimeter equals 20 meters. In the first step, you're always going to try and convert the vertical centimeter that is given as 1 centimeter equal to 20 meters into a ratio scale so that you're able to compare the ratio scale of the vertical axis with the ratio scale of the horizontal axis on the cross section. In order to go from centimeters to meters, you are simply going to take, in this instance, the 20 meters and you're going to multiply it by 100, and that just requires you to add 2 extra zeros so that 1 centimeter is the same as 2000 centimeters. As both of these values are in the same unit, you can then simply write this as 1 is to 2000. In step number 2, take each of the ratio scales and write them as fractions, because in actual fact ratios are fractions. So 1 is to 2000 is 1 over 2000, and the horizontal scale can be rewritten as 1 over 50,000. We would then substitute these values into the formula for vertical exaggeration. The value at the top, which is the 1 is to 2000, is written first. We then change from division, we change it to multiplication. The fraction at the bottom, you're going to invert the number, so 1 is to 50,000 becomes a 50,000 over 1. If we then multiply across the top, 1 times 50,000 is going to give you 50,000, and 2,000 times 1 is going to give you 2,000. When you divide these two values into each other, you get an answer of 25. At this stage, it's important to remember to add the word times, 25 times, and what this tells you is that a scale of 1 is to 2000 is 25 times bigger than a scale of 1 is to 50,000. Given a vertical scale of 1 centimeter equals 10 meters, your first step would be to convert the 10 meters into centimeters by simply multiplying by 100, so that 10 centimeters is the same as 1,000 centimeters, which would then enable you to rewrite the vertical scale in terms of a ratio scale of 1 is to 1,000. These values can then be substituted into the vertical exaggeration formula, where the vertical scale is divided by the horizontal scale. At this step, you would end up with 50,000 over 1,000 with a final answer of 50 times, meaning that the vertical scale has been exaggerated 50 times over and above what the horizontal scale of the map is. And in actual fact, the vertical scale used on the cross section is 50,000 times larger than the horizontal scale.